it's really cool that Meta decided to come here tonight and talk to us about all the things VR. And I just want to say thanks to American Underground for letting us use this beautiful place for this event. I think it looks amazing. Would you agree with me? Yes. A little bit about NCXR. So we are basically a community group, and our simple purpose is to promote XR industry and community in amazing state of North Carolina. And everyone here is welcome. Please be respectful, don't be spammy, and I hope all of you brought your friends tonight, and please bring even more friends next time. And if you haven't done this so yet, please scan the QR codes and get connected on our LinkedIn group, as well as the meetup group, so we can stay in touch and you guys get updates on the future events. And with that, we're ready to proceed to our main part, which is the keynote, Deepak. Take it away from here.
It's great to meet y'all. I'm going to be working from the computer over here, so you'll still see the slides, but that's be my home base. So don't feel like you have to stretch over. But I know a lot of you guys are game design students and stuff, so like, yeah, this is coming from an introvert, like, networking is key in game development. Even if you hate it, you gotta try. And everyone, like I work with Dilmer, so he's my colleague, right? So a lot of you know Dilmer, right? So like, nicest guy in the world. Like, and that's how a lot of people, I mean, you will find jerks, but a lot of people are just happy to share their wisdom, happy to like meet you, like LinkedIn them, pitch, always be selling is like what my boss always says. So like try to find ways to just like meet people. So like I agree with Georgie. I'm a developer advocate, and the first question I always get is like, what is an advocate? That's a good question. It's a made up term, but basically it's a tech evangelist with a background usually in something that the company is focusing on. So one of the things Meta is focusing on is UGC, as someone has pointed out, most people don't know what that means, user-generated content. And that could be a blanket term from everything from Instagram is user-generated content to game development. So my background is I founded the DevRels for that little company at the time, Roblox, and Fortnite Creative before it, after Battle Royale, and they were looking to start getting into the user-generated content. So that's my background. I love that space because I think it's the future, right? I think eventually there'll be what I call like, I like to call it like a convergence, right? So people ask me like, why did you join Meta, right? Well, I like joining, I'm a startup person actually, which people will say, why would you go join one of the biggest companies when you're a startup person? That's a good question my wife often asks me. I love new things. I love starting new things, right? And so when I was at Roblox, I was telling the story before, right? There was no really like user-generated content place that was also safe for kids. Whether you think it's safe, that's a whole nother story. But if you were looking at Second Life, you had like great content there, and there's more risque content as well, right? So Roblox was a huge attempt to try to create a more safer place, compliant place, right? So that's what I loved about it, is like no one was really trying to design games. My one secret for people about game designers is they hate making kid games. The kids are who play games, right? Teenagers, young adults, those are who have the time and the money. Then eventually you get kids and you have to do like grown-up stuff, or until you can play Call of Duty. And then I went to Fortnite because Fortnite sort of introduced on a grand scale crossplay and live events. So I love being in that space because you sort of get why YouTube works. YouTube, like the big ones, it eventually becomes sort of this live event sphere, right? And that's why people are attracted to it, because they know when to tune in, they know when to get involved, right? And they want a relationship with their content creator, right? And that's what Fortnite really mastered, and honestly changed a lot of the gaming landscape that you guys are designing in. So this next one in my mind, I'm a futurist, right? Which is not true or not. But I think there's going to be a convergence, right? Where you're going to have user-generated content. You're going to have live events. But I think that next step, and I think it'll be there in the next, people will say next year. I'm more of a 5 to 10, 20-year person. That to me is very soon. Where technology, whether it's AI, XR with the glasses, right? The VR headset, mobile, I'm including mobile because mobile's not going anywhere right now, right? Will converge where it's easy to switch between those little phases. And I think that's where a beautiful place to design is, because I think once that switching between those mediums becomes easy, so the example I give is like, imagine a kid going to classes, right? They'll get on the school bus, right? Maybe they'll have their glasses on, right? Looking at different things, playing something on their mobile phone, get home, put on their VR headset, get tired of that a little bit, then go on their desktop to create. Like, this next generation is going to be in that loop. So like, the more you can sort of understand, like that's where technology is going to be going, I think the better designers you guys will be. Okay. But many of you probably don't know what Horizon Worlds is. It's again, UGC platform. And the way I just sort of describe it is a social platform. So basically you can build, you can share, and you can sort of like live these experiences that traditional platforms can't create. So it's not limited to just a headset, right? But now with sort of the desktop editor, it's also available on mobile, right? But why I like it is the kicker, which we'll get into later on, is by Meta getting into this space, developers, designers like you can eventually have access to 3.4 billion people. Because that's how big the family of apps is, right? So now you're creating for something, not for just a limited new platform, right? Or for this size of audience or a Steam audience. You're designing for like an entire world. And I think that opens a lot of doors. I'll show you one killer feature later on that'll start to give you sort of the vision why I think it's going to be a game changer. But I like to think about Horizon World as like this social platform that's mobile friendly, backed by Meta's like massive ecosystem, and built sort of around the power for creators and communities. So I think the more you understand that concept, the more you realize like what it means to sort of design in this new world. So the main question why we're here is like when you build for these UGC platforms, who you're designing for. So there's a reason why I'm showing you that Top Hat game. It's made by End Dreams. You know, if you guys are VR gamers, right? That's a very popular VR studio, right? And I actually love the game they made on PlayStation VR 2, which is called Synapse, right? Which is like a single player, first person shooter, very visceral, right? Very fast action, right? And then you have this like silly little like top hat game where people exchanging hats to get their hat bigger. So you might be wondering, why in the heck would a VR studio, right, be building a mobile game? And I think that's exactly the point I want to bring up is like, as designers, you have to start looking for ways to expand your audience, right? And you can't just take your mindset or what you were good at before into these new platforms. Because the best designers know who they're building for. And that's who we get to. At Meta, we call it the TAIA audience, which is teen and young adults, because you have to be 13 to actually play on Horizon Worlds. And this audience is primarily 13 to 24-year-old, incredibly tech-savvy, socially minded, and highly creative. But the trick with them is they don't want to just consume content. They want to be part of it. Remember, this is where I was telling you, like, you start to see these patterns, right, on YouTube, where they're not just watching the video, they want to interact with it, right? And that's in the 2D video space. Now imagine when you're now in this immersive space, that same mentality is there. So even if you're coming from like an XR or app development background, seeing these sort of patterns and how this demo like chooses what they want to get in part of is critical. So just to talk a little bit more about this demographic, I'll sort of like zoom in on like Generation Alpha, right? This is probably the largest cohort that's ever been digitally native. So they love seamless social interactions, they love creative freedom, and they love meaningful community engagement. So if you can't meet those needs in your experiences, in your apps, right? You're just not building the right product, right? You're not going to end up with a loyal audience and a thriving community. So again, my repeating noise here is like, the more you understand who this audience is, the more you can design for them. So I don't want to leave you with like too much like philosophical things, but like what are the things that actually motivates this community, right? So now you have platform and tools. Now you know the audience is 13 to 24, this young adult teen audience, and they're looking for connections. So what are the things that actually really motivates them? Well, one is relatedness, right? So relatedness is this idea, right, to drive, to connect, and belong. So that's especially enabled on mobile phones and also VR headsets, right? That's why, and we'll get into a little bit why some of the top games are so popular right now, right? If you look at any major study of this demographic, public studies, you'll find that like they consume so much content that they're getting drained. But the one thing they're still looking for is connection. So your job as a designer is to expose, not expose in a bad way because it can be used badly, but using those guardrails that Meta provides or any good platform provides to get them to connect with others and with your material. Next is sort of competence. There's this need for mastery and recognition with this audience, right? So like, think of like progression systems, right? So like, competence comes from like, just like any kid trying to show to their parent, right? Like, I know I can do this, let me show you how. And so again, as designers, how do you create that kind of systems and mechanics that allow them to sort of like start building that muscle to get competent in your game? So like my one rule for a lot of designers is like, if you're trying to make money at least, right? Make it hard to fail your game at least in the beginning, right? At least in the beginning, right? Because you're trying to get them into like what I call like a flow state when you're building your experience, where it's not too hard but not too easy, and they keep climbing that ladder. Now the third thing, this is the one I think is the most important, me personally, and I think the hardest one to pull off with this audience, which is this idea of like autonomy. So here is like, they're looking for like meaningful choices. So like player-driven goals and emergent experiences. So the example I try to point people to is, are you guys familiar with like Minecraft survival servers? Yeah. So like, exactly, all the young people know that. Yes. But the reason that works is like, it exactly gives you the autonomy the player is looking for, right? It's like, I call it like controlled chaos, right? There's like this loose sandbox world, right? With some rules, right? But your intention is you want to break the system, right? But you make choices, that's why sandbox games are so cool, in a way that like impacts how the game is, right? Like if you trigger this trap, right? Maybe a landslide comes down, right? And affects the whole map, and now the zombies that come at you are just a little bit slower, right? And why that matters, which we'll see later on, is like, when you master these three things, that's what creates sharing. Which sounds like sound very dumb when I say it, like of course Deepak, it's sharing, right? But most people don't actually try to execute that design. So when I mean sharing, like your content has to be so good in today's world, which is not meant to be dire, right? But like, that they will share it to their friends, share it on the playgrounds, and share it on social media. If it doesn't do that, it doesn't mean it's a bad experience. I'm not one of those people that if it doesn't succeed, it's just like it's not hitting your goals if you wanted those to be your goals. So you should always have that framework, like once you master those three motivations, are there moments and highlights that people want to share? Now I added this little thing, this is my research lately, called acquisition and wrapper. Because a lot of people, when they do studies on this audience, they're like, oh, these are the types of things that like teens and young adults want to do, but they miss one element. And I put that in the acquisition and wrapper thing. So there was a good article. Does anyone remember what the name of the movie, that #1 movie on Netflix is? And Billboard and it's a huge deal, K-pop, something. Of course you all know this. Of course you all know this. Yeah, it's K-pop Demon Hunter, right? And one of the lead artists, he gave an interview, right? He's like, why do you think people are so drawn to this, right? And people will say it's K-pop and all this stuff. It's like, no. We built something that this teen or young adults, for him it was kids, that the generation above them thought was cool. So very critical thing I'm saying here is like, so like, you're building for teen and young adults, but really you're trying to nail that like 20 to 30-year-old, because the younger person thinks what the older person is cooler, right? So when I was at Roblox, right? Roblox High School, very well-known game. Who do you think played that game? Of course you guys nailed this question. I said this to a room of adults before and they didn't know anything. Yes, middle schoolers. It's that aspirational idea that those kids want to mimic those things in these role-playing scenarios. So that's the other part of the acquisition, right? You're also creating, I showed this I think before, let me see. Like, this video here, I'm literally walking around leasing an apartment. And I'm pretty sure I committed a crime and I should be like arrested because I go into this lady's apartment, right? And she's just trying to show me her cool apartment and I started like a Nepo, like just started stealing stuff. And taking stuff out of their house that they had put neatly in there, right? But like, leasing an apartment, right? That's what older people do when they get their first job. They're role-playing, right? So when you start to see how that system works, you start to see like why these hit games work, right? So, we know the platform and tools are there. We now know the audience. We now know their motivations. We now start to see that they're craving these sort of like, what I call like these socially minded games. That's why these games keep popping up in society, right? Because it nails that audience, it nails that creation aspect, and it nails that motivation. So the way I like to like try to show people the differences, like, let's look at the gaming sphere a little bit, right? So you have your mobile games. So like one of my friends, he's like a director on Marvel Snap, right? So if you guys have played Marvel Snap, right? It's like this 2D card-based game where you're battling, right? High progression systems, 2D interfaces. It's social in the sense it has leaderboards and you can battle other people, but not like immersive 3D social, right? That's one space, right? Then you have like hardcore games. These are things like Call of Duty, Battlefield, right? And that's like me, old fogey, right, in my 40s, 50s, right? Like we want that like intense 3D shooter experience. Don't want to really deal with people, but we do because we love that KD, which is that kill and death ratio, right? Then you have indie games, right? They're always like one indie game a year, is what I say. We're now living in the world of Samsung. Indie hype, I know. There's always one, right? And that's when everyone is collectively, there's something cool narratively here and art-wise that everyone will say like, that's the winner. Those are indie games in my mind. I work on an indie game on Unreal, Demon Crush. You should always be hustling your indie games when you're a designer. But that's an indie game space, right? But the biggest space is this socially minded games. They often appeal, right, to these younger audiences, and they foster environments, right, where people can play. That's when you start to see like why games like Fortnite and Among Us work so well, because people committed to those motivations, to that creator mindset. But you can also, I know a lot of you are VR fans and XR fans, right? Like, hearing VR devs is always funny to me because I don't come from that space naturally, but Dilmer and Jake do, my coworkers, and so they love that stuff. And like Jake came from Animal Company, and like VR devs, wow, why are these games doing so well? But now you guys know, right? Social connection, culturally relevant, right? That goes back to the rapper, right? That sandbox chaos. And then throw a little mystery in there of like why the dam is in the world. If you know anything about Animal Company, you start to see why those hits make sense. Because traditional game makers, right, going back to mobile, that's too static, right? That's like the Pokemon games, right? Hardcore games, you're just going through that one experience, right? Whereas indie games, they're beautiful, right? But they usually one dev, right? And you're just doing that one mechanic over and over and over again, right? This, just like those like Minecraft survival servers, anything can happen, and that's storytelling. Because the thing, if you read anything about like how the human mind works, is we love to tell stories. Especially with this audience, they want to go back to school the next day or tell their parents what something happened in that world. So the more you create these systems that allow for that, the more you connect with that audience. So again, it's just some more facts here, but like, this has been the model, right? This is probably one of the bigger games on Horizon Worlds. But the idea is, right, just another breakdown, right? Is like, it's a role-playing scenario people know. The younger audience wants to role-play in that situation. This one's also a little freaky in the sense, like, I think it's like Russian roulette, right? But that's always that emergent gameplay that happens, right? But you start to see why those things bubble to the top. So, we know the platform and tools, we know the audience, we know the motivations, we know where it sits in sort of the gaming space now. But what do people do in these experiences? Well, going back to our thesis, right? They want to be creative. So the way I sort of joke about it is like, it's a meta. You are a developer creator making an experience for a player to be creative or a creator in your world. So again, I'll give another analogy, right? Some of the best YouTubers, what they do is like, hey, let me start a song, and then you add your stuff to it, and I'll make a video from it, right? Or let me build something in these worlds, or these types of mechanics like explore, build, or share, right? Sharing means not just sharing externally, but sharing a co-op experience. That's another reason why Helldivers did so well, because it wasn't just another shooter, which you're just going against each other, you're going with other people, right? And that's another key thing that this demographic's looking for. And customize, right? These are all under the umbrella of creative and what they're wanting to do in your experience. So if you're giving them an on-rails experience, it doesn't resonate with them. They need to be creative in your world, which is why it's such a hard field and fun field, is because you have to really understand your world and what you can do in your world that can create some interesting stories. So, we could definitely do more design talk, but I wanted to run through the editor real quick, just to give you, just a quick run through. This is the Horizon editor. You guys are all welcome to join. I'll have a QR code later. You do have to sign up because you can earn money, which we'll talk about money in a bit, because I know that it should motivate everybody, in theory. But like, this is your main like port window. This is your hierarchy. This is where I don't know how rudimentary I have to get, right? So, but like, it's object-based programming, right? So I always wish this was explained to me, right? So this is where you throw your objects, right? Because basically, your job as a designer is throwing objects in the world and then adding scripts that creates functionality. So you can add your only objects, you can add scripts to them, but the main focus for Meta, especially this year, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, is GenAI. So why this, fair enough. And I'll give my caveat about GenAI, because I'm more of a moderate on GenAI. But what it does well is like, it really helps you learn. That's how I see GenAI, right? I'm a reverse engineer, so I like seeing things being built and then sort of like, okay, let me generate a script, then I can study that script. Let me generate a model, and then I can see what the base of the model is, and then get a real artist to make something. I'm a still believer that like art direction is not going anywhere. And the more you understand that, you can at least then understand the artist's pain, right? Minimum. But it's a great way just to start getting to know stuff. So like, let's do generate a sky. But this is where they're really focused on this type of stuff because they really believe they want to speed up the process for developers. So I think this is a great like prototyping machine, if you want to see it that way, to get your ideas out and then generate, hopefully on Horizon Worlds, but any other platform. Because I came from Unreal as well. Like I know a lot of AAA studios use Unreal for AAA development, and then they use it in their own engine because it's great at prototyping these things. So the other thing is like you can easily add gizmos like NPCs. One of the cooler features is they've connected the NPCs to LLM. So now you can basically like throw random NPCs in there and create sort of a character, and they can have natural dialogue without you having to write all the dialogue. I think that's a pretty cool feature, but I haven't seen it designed well. That's where designers, this is where your playground is, right? I think the biggest deficit in game making is design. So the tools are out there, can you use them? Because like now you can start doing these types of things, but like, you know, take a look. Exactly. What? That's a great question. I haven't seen it, but like it can talk to me though. Yeah. So if we can show maybe a world, the fishing game, and you can just see it naturally talking to you. No, because here's the catch, right? Like part of what you remember I told you about Second Life, right? Like they didn't sell it to families. So like that's why right now it's a closed system. I'm a convergence person, right? So I think eventually you'll have maybe more approved LLMs in the future. But that's the beauty, at least. One thing I do like at Meta is like they have more of an open AI philosophy. So you can probably I'm not a representative on this, but like my hope is you can choose your algorithm. But just like that, you've added a skybox, right? Which would have taken, I don't know, like weeks. That doesn't mean you can't still add your own skybox. Doesn't mean you can't add your own meshes. You can import from Maya and Blender. But this is a great way to sort of just get your gears going and sort of get into game development. So, money. I like to bring this up just because I always don't realize, like, people don't realize how much free money is out there. And when an emerging platform, again, why I love these spaces is because I always leave to go to the next emerging platform, because there's always more innovation that's happening, there's always more money going out to creators, and that's my passion, to see you guys create. So like for those who are interested in the VR ones, they have the START program, great programs. You can't just be anybody, right? But this is the goal of you as a designer. You start building your portfolio. You apply to these programs, right? You build your design docs, right? You build your worlds, start building that, and they look over that. Now, Horizon Worlds, they have the same thing. They have creator funds, right? So in a couple of weeks, I know they're going to, this is unofficial information, like they're going to be posting more on the accelerator programs. That one, if you have a good portfolio and great game design docs, they give a lot of people chances. So that's a great one to like pitch your game. Again, show who you are before when you apply to these things, right? The Creator Academies, some of you have been there, right? We basically pay for you to come out. Georgie has been there, right? To do a crash course on Horizon Worlds, and we give talks, just walk you through the whole editor and do a build along. And again, they also do RFPs where you can pitch your game design to the higher level DevRels, and they fund your game. So there's a lot of ways to get both on the VR side, but also on the mobile side as well. Again, I wanted to come back to this one point because it leads to this other question we were going to discuss, right? Is like, one of the reasons I came to Meta is there was always, when I was at Roblox, when I was at Fortnite, there was always this one problem that kept happening, right? As young developers, it's always hard to get your content out there, right? So the number one problem for any developer is audience and reach. But I felt like no one was trying to solve these problems at these platforms. So this is a Deepak moment, Deepak philosophy point. Like most platforms are built on like the top, right? Once you get established, they only have to care about like the top 10, the 1%ers, right? So when you go to Netflix, it's the top 10, right? You don't go past, I know at Roblox, you don't go past the third row and you don't go horizontally, right? So that's really hard when you're putting your content out there, right? So I think it's on the platforms to find better ways to do discovery or start trying to create these types of tools and features to get your content out there. So I'll skip that. Now I'll come back to this because we'll make that part of the fireside chat. But I want to show you one thing. I made my wife, she's not a gamer, download. I sent her one of my template games I made or copied over. I sent it over on Facebook Messenger. So this is all real time. That's why it's slightly slow, but there's also me talking to her what I'm doing. But if you notice, this is the coolest thing ever that most people don't know about. Basically, I'm sending over a link to a game, right? On Facebook Messenger, right? She clicked on it. It knows it doesn't have the Horizon app. And it knows she doesn't have an account. So with one click, she's able to, you'll see, set up an account. It gives her a name, a screen name, because she knows most people don't want to worry about their screen names. So it gives them a screen name. Once she accepts, it throws them in the game. So maybe that blows over you a little bit, how crazy that is. I never said they downloaded another app. So now imagine Facebook, or Meta, like you can be on your Facebook, your Instagram, your WhatsApp, like that's the future. You directly marketing your stuff to people and they're not having to download another device or another app. As designers, I think that solves one of your biggest pain points. That excites, I mean, I'm just dealt with too many developers, right? That excites me because then you can find your audience. So that goes back to my point, which I didn't make yet, and we can do this in the fireside. What do I think is the future? I think the future is you're half marketer, half developer. So the platforms that give you that kind of device and that power is only going to make more sense for you as a designer. So, well, maybe we can transition to the fireside chat.